Jacques. How are you?
Very well. And you?
I'm excellent. I'm really enjoying the hot weather. It's one day closer to winter, so I'm enjoying every moment of the heat, and I hope you're doing well.
Oh yeah, no, weather's nice here too.
We have a video lined up. I saw this the other day and thought it was really funny, but also accurate. And so we're going to play this quick video and then react to it. So if our producer could bring that on screen for us, please. Now we didn't hear it, and but if we could hear it, you can hear the man breathing. And by the time he gets to the Canada, he's carrying all these bags of money, and this huge tent maybe full of money on his back that he's having to carry. Like you can hear him breathing. It's really hilarious. We could share that link maybe in the comments. But had you seen that before, Jacques?
I had not. In fact, I was intrigued that the tax burden in this country was greater than, say, the UK. Although intrigued, not necessarily surprised, given that our current government and past governments, to be fair, never seem to question whether they need more money. It's very interesting. The spending side of things is always taken as a given. But I'd like to point out to the audience that the current average tax burden in Canada, and I think the average household now, it's annual revenue of something like $88,000. The average tax bill, and here we're talking all taxes: income tax, land transfer tax, sales tax, gasoline tax, and so forth. It's 45.3%. We're creeping in to 50% of all of our income going into taxes. And that number was 33% in 1965. So it's gone up 12 points, which when you start from 33% is actually close to 40% increase. It's the government's take is like a cancer. It's growing and never stops. And people better wake up and demand considerable spending cuts in order to bring down our taxes, because it cannot go on like this. There are many, many well-documented economic reasons why you have to lower the tax burden. I mean, for one thing, we are losing already good people to countries that are more welcoming to entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, no, it's a funny, although funny in a sad way, video about our tax burden. And
Agreed. I was reading in a forum not long ago, and one of the common tropes, someone might say, about libertarians is that we might often say that taxes are theft. But then in a response to a comment like that, someone wrote, and this was intriguing to me, someone wrote that taxes are theft, particularly when the taxation is for the purpose of wealth redistribution. And I found that interesting because there are, of course, some useful things that can get done with taxation. Only, let's say, the most ardent libertarians will argue that things like roads and electrical grids and other large infrastructure, public infrastructure, should not be produced by or managed by government. But I think there's a more moderate view that would say that if we all can agree that we need potable water, and it's really helpful that we pipe it into the ground and we do it across at a community level. That could be a useful way to spend taxes. I don't know how you feel about that distinction, that taxation for things like infrastructure might be useful, whereas taxation for wealth redistribution is clearly a category that libertarians would stand against.
While I certainly understand the distinction, and I think it would be easier to have sympathy for taxation that go to pay for things that every single Canadian requires. So leaving roads aside for a moment, like national defense would be an example where, as a Canadian, I would say probably most Canadians would not want to be invaded and have possibly killed or what have you. And I'd probably pick the most difficult element to defend from a libertarian point of view. So maybe I should move to something more mundane, like roads. Although, again, I always stress I'm the leader of a federal party. In terms of roads, those are mostly provincial jurisdiction. But to go along, what do you do with say, take a Torontonian who only uses the subway to move around? Right? I mean, you can always find unique circumstances where not giving someone the choice is less than optimal. I figure that if people can build buildings, they can probably build roads quite easily,
Mm-hmm.
and make people pay for them. So,
and controlling a transport route, like let's say the St. Lawrence River, or building locks so that ships can move through the Great Lakes, roads at borders where there's national and maybe military interest in securing a border, and there's lots of transport and commerce that occurs across that border. I mean, maybe there's a portion of road there that I think must be paid for by all Canadians. But to your point about the Torontonian that rides the subway, I'm always bothered by this notion that, like, especially the current mayor of Toronto wants more provincial and federal taxation poured into the Toronto area. And I always wonder, like, why would she expect that someone in Timmins should pay for the roads, should pay for the renaming of Dundas Street, or should pay for roads, from North York to Vaughan? Like, why does someone in Timmins have to pay the tax for such things?
because
jurisdictional issues and
the way they. So first of all, I agree with you completely. But the way they justify it is that they always say, well, Toronto is the engine of economic growth in this country, which is complete nonsense.
Because Alberta is.
Yeah, well, yes, but
Just kidding.
I find it very annoying, this constant these examples that are like where the economy is always an engine, right? The engine's running too hot, the engine's running too cold. I mean, that's just not the way it works. I mean, I don't know who came up with this in the first place, but it gets repeated ad nauseum, right? Like what spurs an economy on is savings, and the savings that are then used to acquire capital goods that make us more efficient, whether it's based in Toronto. I'm sorry.
Savings and choice.
Right. So whether these capital goods are deployed in Toronto or Timmins makes no difference whatsoever. These are cheap rhetorical justification provided by people who have nothing else to rely on.
We have a good comment, by the way, from I think it's the Libertarian Party of Saskatchewan tuning in. Hi there. I haven't read this comment, so let's read it together.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's kind of alongside this a little bit. I've never liked taxation of theft, because theft is usually something that it gets done to you when you're not looking. I think with the government, it's far more like taxation is robbery, because they do it at gunpoint, essentially. Right? Like, they don't come in the back door while you're sleeping. No, they show up at your door with a gun and hand the money over. So it's a
What
form
about
of extortion.
inflation? Inflation is hidden in a way. Like is
Inflation is absolute, and here I'm going to use again. I don't like it when words, where their meanings change. Like, if you were to find a dictionary from the 1950s and you looked up the definition of inflation, they would tell you inflation is an increase in the money supply.
Mhm.
I mean, that used to be the old and proper definition. But of course, over time, increasing the money supply, of course, was associated with increase in prices, and the definition got morphed into describing an increase in prices. But yes, an increase in prices due to an inflation of the money supply is absolute theft. And let me give a very simple example. People will get it. Let's assume that you should tax people in order to, the government needs to tax $100 out of people's pocket in order to spend $100 on whatever it is, a service or whatever they want to. Okay. But they say, taxing people would not be politically popular. Okay. So we are going to increase the money supply by $100. And we're going to use that $100 to spend it on whatever. So what happens now? Well, because the money supply has grown by $100, prices will go up. Right? So you see the people will have to pay, but this time they pay through increased prices as opposed to the money being taken out of their wallets. Again,
And a lot of
through,
people don't make the connection, so they
no,
don't
they
believe
don't. But
inflation as another form of taxation, but
yes,
it really is. It's another way for government to have money that it didn't earn. It just took.
Yes, yes. So no
Yeah.
doubt about that.
Thanks for the comment, by the way, and thanks for tuning in. By the way, I should mention we are not on X right now. We have a little trouble connecting to the X live stream. I'm told that that's not successful for this particular broadcast, but we are at YouTube and Rumble and Facebook. Now, changing the topic slightly, Jacques, you and I, before the broadcast, we were talking briefly about, well, you had some thoughts about government, and you were giving recent events regarding Joe Biden as example, and I'd just love to hear that story.
Right. So this is a commentary not about Joe Biden's politics, although I don't care for the guy at all. He's a major statist. He stands for pretty much everything against that I do as a libertarian. But I want to use what has happened with him as an example again of why we need the smallest government that we can get away with. Joe Biden's mental issues, cognitive impairments, and the like have been well known for many months, possibly years. Now, all this time, the people in the know were lying about the state of his mental acuity, and were happy to basically bamboozle people because they thought he was a winning ticket.
Yeah, he's sharp as a tack, they would say. And I remember interview after interview, guest after guest on the mainstream outlets that would repeat that statement, that he's sharp as a tack. He's
Right.
sharp. He's alert. He's sharp. And yet the video, we've all seen them. The videos indicate that he's not all there. I have friends, by the way, who message me privately who they've called it elder abuse.
Yes. Yes. I mean, he should be in a home, frankly, or under severe care. Now, so then he had the debate with Trump, where he did exceedingly poorly. And at that point, many people finally recognized what had been obvious to many of us. But now we're talking tens of millions of people who saw him. In fact, there's I heard the story about a pollster in the US who specializes in monitoring voting intentions of the non-affiliated. So people who are not registered as Democrat or Republicans, the so-called swing voters. He had 14 of them in his room. They watched the debate together. So again, I'm stressing these are neutral people. They're not rah-rah Trump. They're not rah-rah Biden. They haven't made up their mind. They watched the debate. At the end of the debate, he asked them what their voting intentions were. 13 out of 14 said, there's no way I can vote for Biden. I have to vote Trump because this guy is just not there. He said he had never seen anything like it, like in terms of such a almost unanimous decision, right?
Yeah, a panel that was so unanimous.
Yeah. Now, overnight polling also showed a massive coming to recognize, I guess, that Biden was not someone fit for office. And it's at that point that the pressures within the Democratic Party came about to remove him. So I stress again, it's not like they didn't know, they did. But when he thought he was a winning ticket, they were perfectly fine, in my opinion, to put the American people at risk by having a leader who was not fit for the job. Perfectly fine. The only thing that changed their mind is when they realized that they could no longer win with him. This is the type of thing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm in politics, because I find this type of behavior to be appalling. I mean, to again risk damage to your people for the sole purpose of either winning an election or remaining in office is beyond the pale. But again, I'm using it as an example. I'm not saying it's the only country where that happens. I think it's, pervasive around the world. But it's a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, when politicians, because of course they're always so good at telling you that they're in there for the little guy and they want there to help. None of this is true. It's all self-serving. It's the power. And I would love, again, to reduce the size of the government where the power that you would get to exercise would be so small that wouldn't be worth your while.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I thought that what happened there was very, very telling, again, about the state of affair in these large parties that, just will want to cling to power almost.
So I think your point is there that he's, the people around Biden were willing to keep him propped up so long as he was useful to them.
Correct.
And then the moment he was no longer useful, they orchestrated his exit.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I would say
well, because we literally had Joe Biden one day say, I'm not stepping down, I'm running for president. And the very next day, right after a meeting with Chuck Schumer that was supposedly, I guess that evening, the very next day was the letter of his resignation.
Yeah, I'm not much into speculation and all that, but I do find it intriguing when people say, was he even aware of the posting on X? And aware, I'm not talking here, was he told? It's just like, would he even recognize what had happened? Right?
There was a meme going around that said something like, hey, when Joe Biden finds out that he quit, he'll be really upset.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah. It does indicate to me that he's not likely to have been running the country for the last number of months, maybe years. Like, I don't know who is, but in his mental state, He at best can influence, but I don't think he's managing things.
No, and I think there's I am convinced there's a parallel in this country. I mean, Trudeau's impairment is not on the same scale, but he is not. If you look at his experience, his lack of intelligence, I mean, I don't think that most of the decisions are coming from him. I think there are people, in the shadow that are guiding what the Liberal Party is doing.
Well, I've often held the opinion that Trudeau is smart enough to surround himself with some brilliant strategists who will willingly help Trudeau to enact the policy trajectory that Trudeau wants, but they also are bright enough to take advantage of the moment and move forward policies they want. And we don't know who they are exactly. We know Gerald Butts, for example, was close and working in the office, and he's as radical as Justin Trudeau and maybe smarter. Chrystia Freeland said the other day in an interview that she speaks frequently with Mark Carney, and Mark Carney is just as radical as Chrystia Freeland, but maybe smarter. And so there's smart people that are moving the policy trajectory forward, or at least they think it's forward, and Trudeau is a nice face and nice hair, nice image to help move things along.
Yeah, he's not a prime minister. He's a drama person who plays the role of a prime minister.
Yeah. We wouldn't be the first to say that maybe everything that he utters is part of an act. There's a movie playing in his mind, and he's acting the part. And it's really difficult to know what is sincere and what are his true convictions.
By the way, did you see, I believe, I can't say for sure, but I believe it's somebody who caught up with him in Tofino, where he's currently vacationing?
I haven't seen that video. I saw part of it. Now, how do you think about that? Because a lot of criticisms have been put forward around Cian Bexty. That's the journalist's name.
Right.
And a lot of criticism to say, hey, leave the politician to enjoy his vacation. Maybe journalists shouldn't be so aggressive. What do you think about that criticism?
Let me just finish, and I'll come back to your point. Is that in this encounter, Trudeau claimed to be working harder than most Canadians.
Surfing in Tofino.
Yeah, right. Anyway. I think if you're on vacation or at a meal or something, you really ought to be left alone. I mean, I think there are enough opportunities. Although, again, I think that journalists in general would be far more willing to cut the guy some slack if he actually treated them and the people they represent as journalists with a lot more respect. Because the prime minister, like many people in politics, will give essentially non-answers. I mean, they'll be flapping their gums, but to a very direct, almost black and white question, they will give you a nonsensical, which like I've often had this wish, almost like a fantasy, that a journalist would push back and say, the answer you just gave me had nothing to do with the question I asked you. You were therefore disrespectful to me and the people who read or listen to my call, or whatever, right? Who they would like to know the answer to this question, and a real one, right? But again, politicians, I think they show themselves to be immoral individuals when they can't, show the decency to answer the direct question. So if you did that on a regular basis, I don't think that someone would feel that they had to hunt you down to Tofino to ask you questions.
I agree. And Trudeau is very choosy about the journalists that he allows in his
Oh yeah,
vicinity. So because he's got such control, it seems, of the message and the journalists that are willing to relay his preferred message, yeah, I can see independents, some independent journalists are very interested to find him on the beach if that's the only place that they can access him. I do have a personal distaste for activists and protesters that take their protest to someone's home, for example. Like I would never personally join a group to protest on your front lawn, or even at at um, at Trudeau's cottage at Rideau College. Like I wouldn't support that. I think protests should happen at the public square. I think that's where the media scrum should exist too. The media scrum should take place at the public square, um, not on the beach. Although, yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm very interested to see the video and hear the interview. Many people were surprised that Trudeau even accepted the interview. You know, that he didn't have the journalist arrested. He instead agreed to have a conversation.
yeah. Well, maybe he's finally getting it.
Getting what exactly do you mean?
Well, I think, to your point, calling in security or whatever, whenever he's encountering someone who's not going to lobbing softballs at him, right? Like when he goes on CBC,
Yeah.
I concur with you, like in terms of your point, that if he made himself available to True North or Rebel or outfits like that on a regular basis, I don't think they would feel that they have to go to Tofino to hound him. But when you restrict yourself to Rosemary Barton, who's going to ask you the most tepid
Scripted
questions, yeah,
questions.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Um, a few months ago, we committed to prepare 2 series of videos. So the Libertarian Currents, where we intend to talk about current events, and being that it's summer, we're all feeling a little bit uh, willing to enjoy the heat and the sun, and so we're maybe performing the Libertarian Currents less frequently than we'd like, and hopefully we'll do this more frequently in the future. But the other series was the Libertarian Lens, and we've yet to have our inaugural episode, but I do believe that that's coming together. Could you give us some information about the Libertarian Lens that's coming together?
Right. Well, we've identified our first guest, which I will keep as a secret for the time being, but we are working with him to come up with a date where we can do the first recording.
So as soon as we know that date, we're going to announce that and give a little, like these Libertarian Currents, we've just decided to go live and it's very spontaneous. But the Libertarian Lens episode, we will announce that in advance and we'll have some preparation and try to get the word out. So in the meantime, for all of you tuning in, likes, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're notified when we go live or when we announce the upcoming Libertarian Lens episode. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Jacques?
No, it's slower in the summer. There's not quite as many, well, what happened in the US and with Trump, of course, is rather noteworthy, but it's difficult to bring a libertarian viewpoint on assassination attempts. So I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. And that's a topic that many others are exploring, and they're digging in more deeply to uncover the facts. And I have not done that. Like I'm a spectator of that rather than a pundit, you might say. So yeah, let's leave it there. Great to see you again. I look forward to our next conversation.
Likewise.